So today we're going to talk a little bit about a proof of concept we've been working on. So in this specific instance, so I'm actually going to be the cloud subscriber. Jeff is the cloud provider, and Alberto's the solution provider. So a little bit about us. So obviously in America, probably not so much you would have heard about us, but in Australia we're one of the largest banks. 12 million customers, 50,000 staff around the world, and 1,750 stores and services globally. So that's us as an organisation. Ourselves, we're actually building out our own internal private cloud, so that's kind of our first foray into cloud computing. And I guess from our perspective with the Open Data Centre Alliance, so we've actually been a member since the foundation back in 2010. And myself, I'm actually the chair of the security working group and had a reasonably big part in actually the development of these usage models. So the challenges, I guess, in the roles of the usage models. So one of the big things is a common understanding of security standards. And I think that's probably one of the big challenges to cloud adoption. So, you know, fundamentally, what is secure? Now, you've probably heard that spoken a number of times today. Everybody's, you know, really concerned about security in the cloud. And so what we are doing is actually developing these usage models to actually overcome these challenges. So the first one is provider assurance, and that's actually coming up with tiered options for securing cloud environments. So, you know, bronze for basic corporate level, silver for your regular, you know, enterprise strength security requirement, gold for something like a financial institute who has, you know, strong requirements for security in the cloud, and finally platinum. Now, that's kind of where we think is the military spec grade. Probably one of those areas that's going to be a little while before we get there yet, but I guess that's kind of what we're doing. And the other usage model is security monitoring, and that one's actually a companion usage model to do real-time auditing against these standards. So on to the next slide. So a little bit about the proof of concept process and how it works. So the first part is, I guess, the pre-engagement matchmaking, and what that is coming up with, you know, a group of organisations with similar needs. So, and I guess pairing the companies together to provide that. Then we work through the project planning. So what does that look like? How do we turn the usage model itself into test cases? And actually, how do we go through and configure that and develop it? And execution, as I said, testing and seeing if there are the capability out there to do that. And then closure, which is, you know, the reporting. What does it look like? What actions do we need to take as part of this? And I guess from this point, you know, demos and things like that. So I spoke a little bit about the two usage models we've spoken about. So what we've done is we've turned the usage model into requirements for test cases, and we're actually going to go through that in a little bit detail in further and work through that. So it's actually 25 security requirements, not quite 26, but never mind. There's 8 test cases, and from a security monitoring perspective, we're looking to test against that as part of this. So with that, I'm actually going to pass on to Jeff to talk about his environment. Right, that guy there.
Got it. All right, so Terremark has a global footprint of cloud-enabled data centers around the world. We have multiple locations in North America, multiple locations in Europe, and one in Asia Pac. And so when we went about this proof of concept, we have two products. We have a fundamentally unmanaged product, which is just raw compute, raw storage, where customers can upload their own virtual machines. Really self-service is, you know, I would say it's analogous to a co-location type offering where, you know, we're just providing base infrastructure. Then we have another one that's managed, and, you know, we decided that that might be the best approach for the proof of concept in terms of the ability to get this up and running as quickly as possible. So we went ahead and chose that option. In hindsight, it may not have been the best option because there were a lot of things that we had to do manually anyway. You know, primarily, you know, as we dug deeper into the use cases, what we found were that for the gold level of certification, you know, and especially for banking customers, there's extensive logging capabilities that need to be done on the firewall. And most public cloud providers today that are out there, because of the tremendous amounts of networking traffic that we see coming into our infrastructure, we tend to just block and drop traffic, right? So we're not logging it just because there's too much data coming in. So that was one of the things, that I think Trapezoid will get into, that they had to set up some custom, basically, firewall appliances so that they had the ability to do the auditing on intrusion attempts and things like that, where in the bronze and the silver level, just blocking traffic that's not supposed to be coming in is sufficient. So it really depends on the use case. So that was one of the things we figured out early on. This diagram here is a depiction of our standard infrastructure that we offer as a security or as a service provider, where our basic levels of security, we're using traditional VLAN implementations. We have a DMZ network that has access to the internet. And then we have a secondary network that we call our trust network that's using non-routable IP address space with a second firewall in between. And then we use shared enterprise SAN storage on the back end, so we can provide some other SLAs on uptime guarantees and performance guarantees. So everything's clustered, fault tolerant, redundant, dual 10 gig networking, dual fiber channel out the back to get, very, very high performance. And then we see here in this depiction, this is the actual server infrastructure, the monitoring agents, and then some of the firewalls that we had to put into the infrastructure to actually meet the gold criteria usage cases. And really that's what Trapezoid implemented to take what was our base infrastructure and then convert it into something that would be compliant with the ODCA specifications for a gold certification. Want to talk a little bit more about what you had to customize here?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. There goes the mic. So this is basically a cloud subscriber's virtual environment, right? By default, when it is first provisioned, as Jeff was saying, there's a whole lot of things that a typical, even enterprise at the silver level, or much less an SMB, wouldn't really need to comply with. For example, an abundance of auditing when it comes to log management, and maybe some extensive SLAs when it comes to remediating vulnerabilities within X amount of hours that maybe some other non-financial institution may have more lax requirements when it comes to that. So, excuse me, what we found was we had to actually put in additional firewalls that were to be managed by the cloud subscriber. So to Jeff's point as well, and Matt's, the default managed cloud that Terremark provides is very useful and very appropriate for many companies that are going to just deploy a normal cloud environment. In fact, a lot of the managed features that Terremark and Verizon today offer are specifically so that the end user doesn't have to worry about, and people are happy paying for that solution. But what we find is when we get into gold, and obviously platinum, but at least at gold, the management of the cloud itself and its security infrastructure as a whole, part of that requirement is that it should lie on the end user, on the subscriber. The subscriber needs control and management of certain things that if they were not required by law to have control and management of it, then they'd be happy to give it to the cloud provider, and they'd be happy to go silver, stay silver, and be happy with it. But when you go gold, the reason you have to go gold or platinum is because there are some requirements, usually federally stated requirements and so forth, that have to be complied with, and your typical cloud provider is not going to keep 7 years of logs for you, right? You have to do that. The onus is on the organization. So to speak a little bit about the testing methodology, we evaluated and assessed all of the assurance requirements, right? We went ahead and discussed what is it that a provider needs to attest to. And then we went ahead and identified some of the security technologies that we were able to meet these criteria with, right? So the assurance requirements include AV, vulnerability management, data retention and deletion. There's some confidentiality stuff, and there pretty much runs the gamut of a bunch of security technologies, and every subscriber could very well have a completely different tool set that abides or meets that criteria, right? One user is using McAfee, another one's using, the competing products and so forth. And, vulnerability management, what scanner do you use? Well, it should really be relevant to ODCA in general, what the scanner is, what the log management tool is, the firewall, whatever. The point is, you have to meet these requirements, and how are you doing so? And then you have to prove that you're meeting these requirements, right? So once we identified some of the tools we needed, we went ahead and implemented it. We implemented it first in our lab, in our what we call the interoperability lab, which obviously easier for us to do because we got full control of everything, from the server hardware to the hypervisor straight up, so we do whatever we want. So then we went ahead and implemented it in Terremark's VMware cloud. That, in retrospect, we identified halfway through that maybe we should have gone with the less managed option for the gold customer, not the more managed option, which at first seemed to be what made sense, right? And then we actually are implementing the same solution in a Hyper-V cloud provider called Applied Innovations, kind of a small provider as well. And we're trying to implement this in different flavors of the cloud, VMware, Zen, Hyper-V, you name it, from on up, obviously starting with Terremark, with a very robust and well-known cloud solution, so that we can show that, hey, really, the ODC requirements are such that they should and can be implemented anywhere, but not by your average subscriber that's looking to on-ramp to the cloud, and typically not by your average cloud provider. There is kind of a need for a third-party security provider, unless you have an extensive team. Maybe Matt has, a team of 10 guys that are implementing this all the time, right? So maybe you're staffed for it, but ultimately you need a group of security guys looking at filling those gaps in compliance. So, some of the challenges, providers, as Jeff said, I understand. I've been there. You just can't log everybody's firewall logs. You just can't do it, right? Because you have the extreme volume. So now, if you're a customer that needs those logs and you needs to keep them for 7 years, well, the onus is on you. You can't, when you get audited or you get fined, you can't point to the provider. Well, they don't offer the service, so I'm not doing it, right? Can't happen. You need to figure out how you're going to do it and what flavor of the cloud is right for you. We surface that data from the tools. A lot of security tools aren't multi-tenant, so this is a lot more of a provider situation than a subscriber kind of challenge, right? The providers need to be able to give you securely your customer A's log only to customer A and customer B's logs to customer B. Can be no intermingling, must stay multi-tenant, and in many cases, tools are just not designed to be that way. Security requirements have to be there from the get-go, right? You have to be able to, the plumbing needs to exist. You can't kind of patch it on after the fact. We tried doing that by shoehorning some firewalls into a managed cloud environment that the subscriber would then manage. It just doesn't work. What we ended up deciding, actually, is that, well, if you need firewall logs, then we have to have a firewall on every host. Mind you, perimeter is the host, is the virtual machine itself, and we're doing it at a host-based level, managing the firewall ACLs, managing the logs, reporting that back, whereas the cloud subscriber firewall, the network firewall, as it were, it's not our perimeter. It's basically a demarc, behind which we create our perimeter and we create our security infrastructure. As Matt says, there's 8 test cases we looked into. There's 25 requirements. We've created either a dashboard or report or have pointed to some sort of policy document that should address each one of these requirements and each one of these test cases. Results are pretty simple. Currently, service providers are not able to give you just with a vanilla default cloud offering the requirements you need for gold. And that was kind of our measuring stick, right? Because NAB is a financial institution and they want gold and need gold. So this real criteria is, well, you can't just go out and buy a cloud and expect it to be gold, right? You need to layer some of these security things that we did on top. Subscribers, providers and subscribers must work very closely, right? There are policies governing all of this, right? What's my vulnerability management policy? What's my data retention and deletion policy? Which one of these is a subscriber policy? Is it Matt's team that defines that? Or which one of these is a Terremark policy where, you know, it's not up to Matt's team to define data retention and deletion, only up until Terremark is willing to provide it, right? What is Terremark's confidentiality NDAs, right? You know, those NDAs, you have to have them somewhere. It's one of the requirements. All it is a PDF, but every subscriber needs to have it and needs to be able to point at it. If not, you're not gold. You don't know what the criteria is. And, you know, third-party security providers such as ourselves can help, right? Our whole point is walk in, we take a look. What criteria do you need to be? How are you going about it, and what's missing, right? And that's the whole point of us trying to get through this, is being able to provide people the gap analysis, right, of what it is that we do. With that, I'll pass it back to Matt to talk about the impact of that POC on ODCA.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So one of the things, I guess, which is important to note is when we developed the usage model, it was developed with the best intention. So one of the big things with the ODCA is it's the demand side of the cloud computing. So it's all of the enterprises that say, here are the things I want, here's the things I want the cloud to be. Now, I guess as part of that, the reason we do these proof of concepts is to test the usage model, see if it's implementable, see if it's actionable, see if we can do something with it. And I guess that's a point to make. So, you know, as I said, the purpose of the POC was to do that. Now, upon reflection, it's, you know, we realise, hey, there is some changes we need to make as part of this, you know, and it's not until you do these proof of concepts that you're actually able to realise that, hey, that's necessary. So one of the points to note there was, you know, elements of the usage model were well defined, but however, some of the controls are difficult to implement. So some of the things like, you know, physical audit controls or physical access controls to the data center. So some of those things you can't implement with a technology. That's physical audit requirements. That's go to do a data center, go do a review of it, and a lot of that stuff you just can't do. And none of that stuff's easily automatable. So, and one other thing which I think is another important distinction is when we developed these usage models, we didn't think about a managed service. So we were always thinking, hey, this is going to be something that we as a cloud provider are going to, sorry, a cloud subscriber are going to manage. This is something we're going to use, and that's where, you know, that element of control lies. There are just as many companies and people that don't want that. They don't have the capability to do that. They don't have the interest to do that. That's not their core capability. That's not their core competency. They're a manufacturing company. They're an advertising company. They don't want to have a staff of 100 IT guys to manage it. And for those specific instances, there is just as much relevance to having you know, this gold standard, but have the service provider manage those controls. So what we're actually going to do is actually do further refinement of the usage model, and that's going to be things like, hey, let's break out the usage model so that we've got an unmanaged versus a managed gold and silver and that sort of thing. So I think that's one of the things that really we're going to come out as part of this, and actually also look at the distinction between the both. You know, there might be certain ones where elements of them are the same and maybe completely different. Like, you know, the firewall log is a great example of something like that. And look, as I said, the whole purpose of doing this was to make sure that it's more robust, it's more implementable, and look at the outcome. What we're actually going to do is re-release the usage models, taking all of these things into account, and actually have something which is going to be stronger and easily more implementable by the industry. Next. So I guess the next point is the RFP and adoption. So I mentioned that we're going to be doing an additional refresh, so that's going to be an element of work the security working group's going to go through. We'll probably retest the proof of concept again, make sure that, yes, hey, now we've done these changes, we've re-level set, that these are implementable, and we can attest that you know, Terremark's service is a gold-capable proposition. We're also going to refine the usage model RFP requirements. So as part of all of the Open Data Center Alliance usage models, we plug into the PEAT, the Proposal Engine Assistant tool, I think it's called. And what that allows you to do as a consumer is actually generate RFP requirements to say, hey, these are the sorts of things I need from a cloud service. And one of the things there, so we'll tweak it so there'll be a, hey, I want a managed service, or I want an unmanaged service that I can manage myself. And I guess from this, I guess the closeout there is the opportunity for you guys. So is to learn from this proof of concept from your organisational perspective, determine what you need. You know, do you need a managed service? Do you need an unmanaged service? And I guess from that perspective, demand secure and standard solutions based on the ODCA requirements. And I guess just to close out, thank you guys, appreciate your attendance, and I guess if there's questions.
Yeah, you showed a foil on the ODCA POC process, and I was wondering if there's anything for other solution partners or other ODCA members who want to come together and do other proof of concepts. Is there something that's going to be coming out of ODCA soon that tells them how to actually go and do that?
Yeah, definitely. So as part of this, and look, I guess this was the first proof of concept that the ODCA has done. We're working on, I think there's 7 in flight at the moment, and we're hoping to have 20 or 30 done by the end of the year. So one of the key things which was part of that is actually to generate a standardised test case. What are all the success criteria? What are the failure scenarios? All that sort of stuff. And actually that's been something that's been done as part of this. So I guess because we were the first, there's a couple of stumbling blocks and a couple of hurdles we had to go through. And actually, they have been incorporated into the test plan, so that as part of the future POCs that we work through, or the other work groups develop, they'll take all that into account, so we can, I guess, make it a more streamlined process.
When you showed those standards on the gold and platinum, did you guys also considering all the regulatory requirements for some of the industries, like HIPAA or PCI or stuff like that?
Yes, so good question. One of the things we did want to do, and that's a good question. So the tiering was kind of aligned to that. Now it's very difficult to get every single regulator and say, what are your requirements, and let's incorporate that, because I think it's impossible to implement something like that. But very much the gold standard and above was exactly meant to be, does it meet the PCI requirements? Does it meet the HIPAA requirements? And that's exactly where we wanted to target it. So I guess one other thing which is important to note too is the tiering we've come up with, what we wanted to do is make it a minimum level of requirements, right? So to be a bronze, you must have this, you must have AV, you must have IPS, you must have all of these things. And these are basic things that you must have to meet that requirement. And you would layer above that for silver and gold. And the thing there was, what we wanted to do is make it easy for the consumers to make an informed decision on what they needed. So, if I needed something which needed to be PCI compliant or needed to comply with HIPAA or something like that, the gold service is exactly what I'm after. And by making that easy to determine, what we're hoping is that's actually what's going to start driving consumer adoption of these services at the enterprise level.
Quick question for Terremark. Do you see value out of this for your general purpose offerings? So the experience of working through these requirements and looking at gold security, are those things that then flow back into your main product, or do you think that this is niche just to ODCA requirements?
That's definitely the intent. So the intent is as the different, not just, this was a security POC, right? There's interoperability working groups that are taking place, things about I/O control and SLAs and guarantees. So, our intent, and one of the reasons we participate in the ODCA is so that we have, early access to the upcoming standards, so that it can be fed into our product management and then our product development groups. Some of the existing products that we have in market today, we've been offering for over 3 years now, right? So sometimes it's difficult to retrofit new standards into that, but at the same point, we're always developing our next gen products. So that's one of the reasons we do participate in this organization, so that we can streamline them and build them in, so that hopefully this time next year we will have a managed gold platform, right? And by doing proof of concepts, it allows us to understand, taking our existing product set and understanding what's missing. And I think that as members adopt these standards and begin to put put these things into their RFPs and RFIs. That many more solution providers will as well, because oftentimes it'll be one of the decision criteria on which service provider that you choose.
Do you have a demo here somewhere?
Yes, I believe there is a demo available over at the Trapezoid stand, which is over
at the
there.
ODCA booth on the floor, right by the in the ODCA pavilion, right by the Red Hat and the McAfee area. We can give you log you into some consoles, show you some of the dashboards and the reports that we created to meet each of these requirements, and we also have a web portal or user interface that we've kind of designed that we can show you, which addresses the security monitoring usage model, right? So there's two usage models, the provider assurance and the security usage model, which were part of this POC. A whole lot more models to come, in different areas. But the idea first was to make sure all of the provider assurance requirements were met, and either by a dashboard or a report or some live KPI or potentially a policy document that explained what that process was, and then also design a user interface that can be plugged into the plumbing, if you will, a front end to the plumbing of this security infrastructure that we're designing to be ODCA Gold or Platinum compliant, so that a subscriber does have a uniform way of logging in and seeing, okay, these are my vulnerability management requirements, whether they have two different flavors of the cloud and a data center, or they're just all on one cloud or just on a data center, right? Ultimately, these KPIs or points of interest are what we're shooting to meet, regardless of what your environment is, and obviously in the cloud, which makes it just a little bit more complicated, because we have so many parties involved, the provider, the subscriber, and figuring out who needs to be compliant with what, and who is providing that compliance. Many times it's the provider and not the subscriber, or vice versa, depends on your flavor of the cloud.
Yeah, and just kind of to add on to that, this is on a live production cloud at Terremark.
That's correct.
I think it's about a dozen virtual machines altogether. And so we brought up multiple versions of Windows and multiple versions of Linux to test that Trapezoid tested against. So it is a live production system.
And they all got the AV deployed, the IPS, the firewall, et cetera, and they're reporting back to these consoles so that we can show the meeting of that criteria. No, not yet. Not on the managed cloud. That's why we're going unmanaged next time. Yeah.
You mentioned that it was pretty difficult bringing together all the parties. A lot of different people had to be involved. You also mentioned that you want to do 20 or 30 POCs as part of ODCA. As part of when you go kick off a POC, is there expectations on time commitments? And from the different member parties, do you have that pretty well formalized? The reason I ask is I hear a lot of people talk about, oh yeah, my day job is, At night I work on ODCA, so I can see that if you do kick off these POCs, they are fairly complex. They do require some dedicated resources, and I just wondered if, do you have set expectations or statement of work or something that you kick off as part of these POCs?
Jumping all over the place. Yes, so I guess these sorts of things, are reasonably resource intensive. That one there. Yeah, so we do level set at the start of it. What are the goals? What do we want to achieve as part of that? And I guess as I said, because this was the first one that was developed, there was a lot more additional work in generating that test plan, the documentation on how you actually do and prove the success of the POC. What we're hoping is, as we do more of these, we're going to get better at them, and there's going to be less effort involved. But yeah, I think there's still a fair bit of effort involved. And look, this is not my day job, as is the case with everybody else. I'm in Australia, so from that perspective, pretty much all of the meetings I attend are at pretty random hours. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of level set it, this was about a 2-month project, and National Australia Bank, Terremark, Trapezoid, we all had high-level commitments from upper management, that this was something we wanted to participate in, and that we were going to apply the necessary resources to make sure that it worked. I mean, I can't speak for, the other two companies, but I mean, it was a significant resource commitment, but in the end, I think it's worthwhile. I mean, I know we learned a lot from this, and I'm sure different usage models will have. I don't think each one's going to be the same in terms of resource intensity. Some will be less, some will be more, but this one took about 2 months.
And I guess the other thing to add on that too is, ideally what we'd like is to actually build on these, right? So, the usage model's done, we've tested the success, and let's use it for something else. So let's not throw away all the work. Let's test the distance VM workload migration, which is another usage model we've got in development. So, I guess a lot of work as a startup, but then less and less as the time goes on. Well, if there's no other questions, I'd just like to say there's a couple of things. So, look, as I said, everything we've talked about, so the usage models, that's all available up on the website. So if you are interested, please go and have a look. The proposal engine assistant tool I spoke about, that's actually able to generate the RFP requirements. And one of the key things here, I think, is if vendors start seeing these requirements, that's actually what's going to start driving the demand for these services. So if you want a gold service, plug in your requirements and include that in your RFP submission, because as I said, I think that's the key thing to getting the vendor adoption of these sorts of things. And look, as I said, share everything you've heard us talk about, and please come along tonight. So there's a forecast reception between 5:30 and 8:30 at the Sky Room at Times Square. So please join us there for the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.